Honest J. Nowak. Oh yeah.
A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back to Honest J. Nowak and Flying with the Phone. So, what I got to go in to talk about today is as simple as pulling this thing out and, well, 665 is what the episode number is. And with that comes yet another blaster from the Rivals lineup. Yeah, I got tons of Rivals blasters that I do want to talk about, so I feel like that this pick right here is surely going to be another way to pretty much bring in Rivals fans all across the world. So this one's basically the one blaster from the Rivals lineup that pretty much got me into the Rivals lineup to begin with. This is the Kronos with the Phantom Corps decoration and colorization, so that's pretty much just the basic gist of what it is overall, but the Kronos sure is a good starter that I managed to pick up, because this was in fact the first blaster that I picked up from the Rivals lineup. Eventually I got to some other Rivals blasters out there, like the Helios, Hera, Apollo, Jupiter, Mercury, Oneros, Saturn, and plenty of others here and there. But the Kronos sure was in fact a good start when I picked this up back in May 2019. So this was actually quite a good way to start my little journey on the Rivals lineup itself, because I sure do love the way that it's been going throughout the last 5-6 years, ever since it began in 2015. Of course I wasn't necessarily into it then, but now I am, because I sure do see a lot of potential for this lineup itself. So, here we pretty much are. Now, if you're very familiar with most other blaster designs, then well, this right here seems to be almost an exact copy of a familiar blaster from the Mega lineup itself. That's right, the Magnus. And the Magnus itself had gone on its own tangent where it had had several different recolors, and it was put on in several other lineups, including the Zombie Strike series, where it was made as a 2-pack, which I also had back then. So that was 3 Magnus X blasters that I managed to get. But let me tell you, I guess Nerf just wasn't finished going on the Magnus-esque route of blaster design, so I feel like that this one right here was just one way of trying to get a little extra mileage. I don't really say that that's a bad idea. I just feel like that it seems a little lazy to pull off certain blaster designs and rehash them constantly around. But not to let that get through to my head very much, I will say that the Kronos is still a pretty good blaster. And I say it's pretty good because, wow, there's a couple other things that I might also have to address as well, because this blaster sure does have a lot going for it, but its functionality is rather simple. You open up this hatch, which, I mean, that's one thing that the Magnus didn't really have itself, because the breech automatically closed itself up, and as you can see, it's kind of like an airtight seal. But now we gotta have a hatch to open here, pretty much. Probably to avoid letting the HIR rounds fall out, but I mean, they hold in pretty well, because I mean, it's just a piece of plastic that probably doesn't need to be on here to begin with. But I mean, it probably sure is a nice touch in case if you leave this thing primed backwards. But, wow. Yeah, there's another problem right there. Sometimes this thing gets stuck midway through. But basically speaking, in order to load this blaster up, you put in 5 HIR rounds through here, which is probably another thing to note, because the Magnus can only hold 3, and the Ultra 5, as I also talked about a couple times, could hold 4. So, of course, those have both been trumped by this thing itself, which can hold 5 rounds, not 4 or 3. So, that's another pretty good thing that I seem to find that happens to be better than both the Magnus or the 5. But the Kronos itself, its smaller size does not necessarily make it better than most of them. Because for the most part, just having 5 rounds probably wouldn't be the best thing to pull off. But thankfully, you can get some accessories and some extra pieces that you can probably attach to this that are a bit modular for Rivals blasters, as there aren't too many that you can find that Nerf has actually made themselves. So a lot of these third-party companies are going to help out with that kind of problem that you might run into if you end up running out of ammo too quickly. But because this thing also has 2 tactical rails, one in the front, one on the priming handle, which is kind of reminiscent of the Maverick, and a couple other blasters that I've talked about that have a sliding priming handle on the back end here, which is used to prime the blaster and load in the next round in the chamber. So that seems to be one annoyance right there, especially if you might actually have an accessory placed on this part of the blaster. There's a good chance that you might have some trouble trying to pull this back, especially when this thing gets stuck. Like, yeah. Looks like I just managed to clear it up right here. So, of course, it only gets stuck after you not use it for too long. So, now that it's freed up, I can pretty much digress about that. But I don't want to digress a lot of other things about this blaster. This is, in fact, the Phantom Corps version of the blaster itself. And there were several other blasters that came alongside it, like the Helios, Hera, Prometheus, and Apollo. So, of course, I don't really see much happening to it elsewhere, even though this actually did get a pretty nifty treatment over in the original Rivals lineup itself, with the red and blue style Kronoses being out. And there, of course, was also one that was planned for the Edge series, which, of course, only has 3 blasters existent, but there was originally going to be a Helios and a Kronos re-release taking place in the Edge series, both of which were canceled. But if those were actually around today, if they were still out, then chances are we could also be having ourselves a Rivals drum magazine, as well as a couple other accessories that the Kronos would have been able to get, including a little like ammo slot that you would be able to attach onto the top here, and you'd store in some extra rounds, as well as a holster. I mean, a holster and an extra ammo container, pretty much, that you could clip onto the side here. That sounds pretty nice. I mean, how could that possibly be passed up? Even as just a concept, it sounded like a great idea. But I guess even more so is the fact that there was going to be a drum magazine for the Rivals lineup itself. So, the Rivals lineup sure has not gotten itself a drum magazine since then, which is it's bad news, pretty much. We were really expecting a drum magazine to come out there. We could also expect the drum magazine to take place in many other lineups as a whole, but I feel like that it would have been a great idea to have that. But, again, I don't really like to get sidetracked here with all this other material. So, again, you also got the safety switch here on the side. And a lot of Rivals blasters do have that, which is pretty nice, especially if you might accidentally hit yourself in the face with it. That would definitely not be a pleasant feeling, because oh, it's empty. Okay. I guess I can't really demonstrate it, but yeah, that's pretty much what it sounds like when it's emptied, but I guess I don't have too much else left to talk about. So, the Kronos sure was a good startup to the Rivals lineup in my time, where I was collecting Nerf blasters again, but the last 2 years almost have certainly been much bigger than just that. So that's probably another good thing out there to mention, that I was really able to pick up on Nerf collecting overall. And pretty soon, I'm going to be having a bunch of other blasters here that I'm going to be talking about soon, where I'll be talking about more blasters that will eventually come up here in Flying with the Foam. But that's for this thing to decide. So, if you want to see more go down on my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.